Hello. Got a few people here. Anybody else coming, do you know, or?
I think I was expecting perhaps more people, but they just might be running late. We can get started in though, and they'll just join in and tune into what's happening.
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get started and then I will remove the waiting room. Okay, so welcome to our second part of our mentorship program. So we got Lexi, myself, Jake, Jamie, and Daxon presenting for you today. So yeah, let's get started.
Really quick before we get started, just want to remind everyone that we are speaking off of our own personal experiences. We are not experts in the field or questions. It's just kind of what's worked for us, what we wish we would have known, and things that are specific to our education or our work and kind of our lives, just giving a little bit of outside perspective. So again, we are not professionals. We just want to try and make the transition a little bit easier and information that we wish we would have known when we were leaving high school or graduating high school.
We are telling you the stuff that we wish we would have known that would have made our lives a lot easier. That's a good way of putting it, Lexi. Yeah.
And
Also,
one
just,
more reminder, this is
yeah.
being recorded, so you feel free to leave your camera off. You do not need to have your camera on. We are all on camera, so we can answer questions and whatnot, but you do not need to. All right, and
Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt us and ask questions.
All right,
Okay.
and we're gonna get started. Oops. There we go. So really quick, we're just gonna introduce ourselves, who we have on the call, give a little bit of insight into what our backgrounds are, a little more perspective on some of the answers that we're giving. So Ryan, do you wanna?
Yeah, so that's me there. I'm a second-year kinesiology student at SFU. I am the current president of the Semiahmoo Peninsula Rotaract Club. I have worked full-time at a door and hardware company. And yes, I do like kayaking. So that's me.
Awesome. My name is Lexi Nguyen. I have a marketing communications diploma from BCIT. I am the current secretary of the Semiamhoo Peninsula Rotaract Club, but I have also held basically every role within the club, president, vice president, treasurer, general member, and have been a founding member as well as a charter member. I'm the current co-district Rotaract representative for District 5050. I am this year's co-head facilitator for Yale 2022. I'm the communications chair for SASE Awards. So hopefully those are some names that you guys are familiar with. And then I'm currently a marketing specialist. And I have also worked in marketing for a few other years or a few years prior to that. And I'm also have experience being a server. Move on to the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm Jake. I'm currently doing a Bachelor of Science in Behavioral Neuroscience at UBC. Hoping to do med school for psychiatry once I'm done. Volunteer experience, I've been with this club since 2018, so we've been meeting every Wednesday for like the past 4 years. I've also volunteered in the Winstanley Neuroscience Lab here at UBC, and my current jobs, I have a few of them. Even though I'm kind of going to do med school in long term, a lot of my current work involves event management. So like organizing concerts. So that's like with LiveX Canada as a booking agent and as an events associate at AMS Events. And in the past, I've worked with Mad Science, being an instructor for like science experiments at birthday parties and stuff. So yeah, thanks.
Hi guys, I'm Jamie Lynn. I am currently a special education assistant in the Coquitlam School District. So I hold a special education assistant diploma from Stenberg College. I have been involved in almost every aspect of Rotaract since 2017. So a lot of experience there. Yeah, that's me.
Hey everyone, I'm Daxton. I'm a third-year kinesiology student at SFU. Currently, I'm the treasurer of the Semiahmoo Peninsula Rotaract Club, and I've been a lifeguard and a swim instructor at SFU for the past 3 years. You can contact me at daxonchan18@gmail.com. All right.
Awesome. So that's just a little bit about us so that you know kind of when we're answering our questions, where that experience is kind of coming from and some of the different backgrounds, or if there's specific fields that you are wanting to know about or interested in, that you can kind of direct some of those specific questions to us. So we'll get started on our first question of the night. What are some interview tips and advice? I think my biggest piece of advice for going to any interview, whether it's your first interview or your 100th interview, is one, go in prepared, do a little bit of research about the company, to some extent, kind of have an idea what they do, so that when they ask you questions or kind of relevant to their work or their environment, you know what they're talking about. You don't have to be an expert on their company by any means, but just kind of have a general idea, as well as if it's something more career focused, then you have an idea of kind of what they do, as well as some of the things they've done in the past. It just looks really good to an employer that you actually put the time in and effort to look at their company, as well as that you actually care and that you want to be there. And then also just be yourself, smile, be open, answer the questions. Don't get into your head about it. I know they can be a little bit scary at times, but really just kind of go in, be yourself. And if you need to take a moment and think about the response, you don't have to spit something out as soon as you get in there. Take a pause, take a breath, and actually think about your response, because your response is likely going to be a lot better if you've thought about it rather than just saying the first thing that comes to your mind. And then, yeah, those are my biggest key points that I would say. Jake, do you want to add a little bit onto that?
Yeah, just adding on to, say they ask you a question and you can't really think of an answer right away and you're kind of like freezing and not really sure what to say. You can say, could you come back to this question? And then maybe like when they ask it again later in the interview, you might have kind of come up with like a little bit better of an answer.
So can I add on to that too, Jake? Or another tip that I was told is you can repeat their question back to them, and then that will give you an opportunity to think about an answer while you're talking. And so there's not that awkward silence. There's still that line of communication.
I would
Right.
also say, like, be honest too. So if somebody asks you a question and you're like, honestly, I don't have experience with that, or I don't recall having to deal with that, just be honest and just say, hey, I just can't think of an answer to that question right now. I'm so sorry. Maybe we can come back to it, and just do it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jamie makes a really great point, especially if it's kind of your first job interview or job in that career. You're not necessarily going to have those experiences. Just pull on what the experiences that you do have. It doesn't have to be relevant to that workplace or that industry. It could be an experience that you had in classroom. It could be a volunteer experience. You can totally pull from those. It doesn't have to be when I worked as a hostess, when I applying for a host position. It's just communication or whatever is relevant at the base of what the question they're asking. All right, I think we can move on to the next one. Anyone else had any last tips on that one?
Nope, I would believe we should move on because we've spent on this already. So yeah. All
righty. So next question is, we touched on this a little bit. If the interview asks about past experience in a field without any or experience that you have, how do you answer that question? So again, just really focus on the experience that you do have. It doesn't have to be specific to that job or that role. If you have experience in handling a difficult situation or conflict, talk about that. It doesn't have to be exactly what they're referring to. And an example I like to give is when I applied for my first industry career job, I had only had experience as a server and a host. And they asked me what my best marketing campaign was that I had done. I didn't have any experience in the marketing world yet. So I gave the example of when I was a server that I upsold my to my customers all the time because that was me marketing. So my upselling was asking if they wanted strawberries and whipped cream with their waffle. So very, very different fields, but the foundational of kind of the key points were similar, and I got the job. So really just go on the experience that you have. Anyone else want to add on to that?
No, because you kind of answered that in the previous question. Let's move on to the next one.
All righty. What are some tips to practice self-care and managing stress?
So I will take, that's one that I will answer. And when taking, it's very important to focus on self-care, because if you do not focus on self-care, you're not going to be able to perform at any task, day-to-day life, work, school, you name it. It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to feel like a chore, and it's going to be very, very difficult. So what I suggest is you schedule time and you remind yourself every day how long this will take. So if you like meditation, for example, remind yourself, okay, it's only 5 minutes. 5 minutes out of a day, that is a sixth of a TV show, or like and compare it to something, make it relative to something. That's how long it takes to make coffee, right? It's not a very long amount of time, right? Do you understand what I'm getting at when I say that? So it's a very simple task just to schedule it in. Let's say at 1 hour before you go to bed. Say you normally go to bed at 10. So at 9, you don't do any school, you don't do any work. That is your time, or 9:30 for 30 minutes. That's something that will be determined best by your schedule, or when you would normally like to go to bed, or you could do it in the morning, midday, but that's a very personal preference.
I'd also say just find something that you enjoy. That's like your thing. So self-care looks different for everybody. Some people, it might be like taking long hot baths or doing something, or face masks or whatever. And some people, it might literally be going out for a walk in nature and just getting outside. So self-care comes in many different forms. For myself, I like taking time out of my week or my month to go get my nails done, because it's an hour or two that I get to sit there and no distractions on my phone or something, and I just get to focus on the present. And it's silly, but it's super simple, and that's what I consider self-care, sort of just staying present in the moment and putting your phone down and focusing on where you are right now.
Yeah, if I could add on to that, like personally, I found that going out for jogs, out like getting some fresh air is really helpful. Meditation, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that already, but just kind of taking a few minutes out of the day to just like purposely do nothing and try to not think about much just for a little bit, just to kind of like clear your head a little bit. And sometimes like self-care isn't like necessarily, it's like self-care doesn't always need to be like something that feels good. Like, I don't know, like sometimes self-care is more like making things easier for your future self. So whether that's like maybe organizing a bit, I guess, okay, I don't know, maybe that's not self-care, but
Yeah,
No,
like
it makes sense. Like
that's
meal
relevant,
prepping,
yeah.
like meal prepping could be your self-care for the
Exactly.
week, right? Like that's what I mean. Like it comes in different forms for everybody. So some people it might be like spending money on themselves. Some people it might just be like putting their phone down and relaxing. Some people it literally could be scrolling on Instagram as their self-care. Like they just take some time for themselves. That's really what it's about, is caring for yourself in whatever way makes the most sense to you. So
Yeah.
finding time in your day or your week or your month to do that is what's really important, because at the end of the day, you are your number one priority and you always should be. So
Yeah, I completely agree. I just want to add on as well. It's already been said, like self-care looks different to everyone, but self-care can simply be saying no. Like if you do not have the capacity to take on one more role, or maybe it's, I don't have capacity to go hang out with my friends tonight because I've had a long day and I need to relax. That is self-care as well. You don't have to go and do an action. It's whatever it looks like to you. I mean, for me, it doesn't look like self-care, but for me, I like to cook. So if I'm cooking myself dinner rather than ordering out, I feel better about myself because it gave me a little bit of time to kind of focus and relax on what I'm doing. But also, got me to be a little bit creative in what I was doing for dinner rather than spending money and going out. So as much as it doesn't seem like self-care, self-care looks different in every sense. And
Could
it's
be
just
washing
whatever
the
works for
dishes.
you.
It could be washing the dishes, right? For me,
Absolutely.
it's the gym, right? That was something I did when I was working, which I really needed was right after I went to the gym, I trained myself that I wouldn't do any work, I wouldn't do any school, I wouldn't do anything other than recovery after the gym. So whether that was stretching, meditation, yoga, whatever it looked like, that was it. And then I'd go to bed. I'd eat and watch TV. That was my time. So like it looks different for everybody. And it's just very important to determine what works for you. Experiment now so you can set yourself up for the future.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we should move on to the next
Yeah.
one. Unless there's any last burning things, we should go on to the next one.
That was a longer one. That one.
That's
is a
okay.
We all spoke on that.
All
So
right.
I will answer this one as
How to
well.
cope with failure and rejection, Ryan?
Okay. So I'll give you a bit of my path hasn't been linear. Let's start there. So like I started when I left high school, I went into KPU science because I had science and horticulture was my degree. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I stayed close to home, did that. And then I failed math, right? I failed math, and that was the deciding factor for me because I had to do one semester with math or physics and I did not want to do that. Like I failed, like I didn't know what to do. So, okay, well, I just went forward, right? You can't dwell on the past. You can't dwell on the past. Just gotta take one step forward. And a famous quote comes to mind when I talk about failure, and it's very relevant. I have not failed. I have simply found 1,000 ways that do not work. Nikola Tesla, right? So it just goes to show that just because you weren't able to accomplish something doesn't mean it's the end of the road, right? There's just another way, another solution that needs to be found, right? So when I failed math, I started working at a door and hardware company, right? And that was probably one of the biggest moments of growth for me as 19-year-old kid, because I had to learn on the fly. I had to learn a whole new industry. And all of a sudden now, okay, I was the only guy doing that job, 2 months experience. It wasn't easy. I got stuff wrong. I made mistakes. It was not easy. It was very, very difficult because I was the new person, right? And I was the only one doing it. So like, that's just my main takeaway. My main takeaway from what I just said there is just keep moving forward. Don't dwell on the past. Take a look at the situation objectively and say, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? Sorry, were you going to say something, Lexi?
No, finish your statement and then I'll go.
Yeah. What can I learn from this? And then tell yourself, I have not failed. I have simply found 1,000 ways that do not work. And then take one step in front of the other.
One thing I think is really important to remember too, and I know in the moment, it's sometimes hard to remember, but just because you didn't succeed or something didn't go the way you had hoped or planned has nothing to do with your worth, that you are still worthy and still deserve to be happy and excited and have joy and whatnot. That just because you didn't get into the program you wanted to, or maybe you didn't get the job you wanted, or maybe you lost a friendship. There's so many different aspects of life that we deal with rejection and failure that it's really important to remember that experience does not define you. Look at it, as Ryan said, as a learning moment and how you can grow and keep moving forward. But just because it didn't happen the way you wanted or expected does not mean you were any less worthy, and you can continue doing great things. And maybe it happened for a reason, because there was something bigger and better waiting for you down the road, or you needed that learning experience to get you to your dream job, or just kind of remember that just because one door closes doesn't mean, or when one door closes, another door opens.
So I want to say something on that too, is like, I can trace my life back to 4 moments where something changed. And it was that something changed and a new opportunity arose, like Lexi said. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. Like, just keep moving forward, keep looking for new opportunities. Doesn't reflect on your self-worth. It just gives you an opportunity to learn. And before we move on, I do want to address the other side of that coin. Whereas if you look at it from the perspective of a relationship. So let's say somebody breaks up with you. How I look at that now is I ask myself, do I really want to be in a relationship with somebody that doesn't know how great I am? That's the question that I believe everybody should ask when a relationship ends. Do I really want to be in a relationship with somebody that doesn't realize how great I am?
I think that can also be applied for just life in general too.
That too, yeah.
That because it's a great thing to remember that, again, looking at your worth, that if you didn't get hired for the job, then maybe there wasn't a good fit and there's something better waiting for you.
Hmm.
All right. Any last thoughts on that one? We'll move on to the next question. Perfect.
Good.
All right. How to apply for a job, Jake?
Cool. So I'm notorious for having many different jobs. I have quite a long resume. And yeah, I mean, I guess, of course, I can give you like the simple answer of like, there's lots of websites with job applications. Personally, I've found that like personal connections are really good for getting jobs. So like if you know somebody who works, I don't know, at a certain place that you find interesting, maybe get to know them, ask them about like whether they're hiring or not. Personal connections are really good in terms of getting jobs. And yeah, I guess probably a big thing is when you submit your resume, make sure that it's kind of tailored towards the specific job. Especially if you kind of have a longer resume with a bunch of different experiences, you might want to kind of crop it down to have the experiences that are kind of most suited towards the position or job that you're looking into. Yeah, and also like applications can take a really long time. So I'd recommend, like what I do personally is I usually have kind of like a template cover letter with some kind of generic stuff that usually is asked quite a bit, like, you know, just what your general experiences are and stuff, and then maybe taking that template and kind of editing it towards the specific job. Any other thoughts on this?
I think those are really great points. I think also, as much as you want to tailor to the job, if you have very little experience, or this is maybe your first job, then either you, again, use the experience you have, put your volunteer experience on, put the leader, like maybe you were part of a club at school, put that on there, because just because it's not work or a job doesn't mean it's still not experience that you have and that you haven't gained skills from those. Additionally, if you only have like very few things, put them all on there. Let them see that you're involved in sports, that you're that you volunteer, that you bring so much more to the table than I'm a high school student. And if you're just a high school student, that's amazing. That's awesome too. But showcase the skills and the experiences that you do have, because it'll look that much better on a resume when you can pull from the different experiences, even if they're not work. I talk about my volunteer experiences in job interviews more than I talk about my work experience.
Yep.
It doesn't mean I can't do the job, doesn't mean I don't have the physical skills that the job is looking for, but it's different aspects of my life that I pull from for the main experiences that I talk about and share. So just keep in mind that it doesn't have to be specific to a job when you're applying to a job, as long as you have that experience.
I think also in general, just like applying to a job, like there's a website called indeed.ca. That's a great place to look up jobs in your area. You can search it up by what job you're interested in, or even just where you live. Another thing too is if you have a local business or a place that you go to often that you love going to and you feel like you'd love to work in, go up and ask them if they're hiring, or if you can drop your resume off. That's also just an easy and simple way of applying in general for a job.
So I want to add one quick thing onto that too before we move on. Highlight the things that set you apart from other applicants, because there's also like for instance, with my kinesiology degree, there's thousands of people that have that degree. What sets me apart? Like what sets me apart from all the other thousands? So I talk about Rotaract, right? Talk about being the president of Rotaract. I also applied for a certificate in entrepreneurship, so I have that distinction on my transcript, as well as an active rehab concentration. Right? So those are just the little things that you can do to set yourself apart, and then work towards being one of a kind. So they might be more interested in interviewing you if there's lots of applicants.
I think by that, Ryan, means just like, because it's hard to know, you won't know what the other applicants are going to have on their resume. So you won't know what's really going to make you stand apart. So I think what Ryan is trying to say is focus on what you love and put that out there, and put the things about you and who you truly are, make those a main focus, especially if you don't necessarily have the qualifications they might be looking for. They might just be looking for a really good person who like just wants to work and wants to be at a place where they enjoy working, right? So you won't necessarily know what's going to make you stand apart, but
Yeah.
the one thing that you do know is the things that you love, and we're all very unique people. Everyone's going to be different, so just focus on what you know and what you love.
Yeah, that's one way to put. Yeah, agreed.
Awesome. Anyone else on that one? We're good.
I think we should. Yeah.
All right. How is life after high school? Does it get hard? What are some things to do to cope with it, Jamie?
I think in general, just as you go through life, it gets hard. There are really good parts and there are really bad parts. Life after high school specifically, it's different, right? And it's what you make of it. So some people may choose to go to university or college or trade school or a technical school, right? And some people may choose to work or travel, or, there's so many different paths that you can take. I think my biggest piece of advice would be follow your heart and your gut. So if you feel like, I'm not sure if school's for me, then don't go to school, right? Maybe you don't want to do that right away. In my personal experience, I was afraid leaving high school that I didn't really know who I was and what I wanted to be. And I didn't go to school until I was 21. So I decided to volunteer. I decided to work full time and save money, and I got to travel and build life experience that way. And I think that it's hard to compare your path to somebody else's path, because I did that often, having not gone to college or university right away, and watching my friends, go to the college parties or hang out and talk about their classes or study for exams or have their reading breaks. I worked full time. I didn't have any of those. And so oftentimes I did feel left out. But at the end of the day, I'm grateful for where I'm at. And I think that I chose the path that was right for me in that moment. And that's really all you can focus on, right? Because you don't know if you're gonna, it's hard to think about, oh, will I regret not doing this right away, or will I regret going this way with my life? It's really hard to focus on that. Just go with what feels right to you, as you leave high school. And I mean, some things to cope with life after high school. I mean, I don't know if you really like cope with life. I think my biggest thing is just have experiences, try new things, meet new people. And that's how you find like your really good friends, and having those relationships and people that you can rely on, when things get hard, people you can talk to, so relationships are huge in life, you know, platonic and not platonic, right? So yeah, that's my big advice. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add, but yeah.
Just one quick thing to add on as well. Jamie did a really great job of kind of highlighting that we're all different. We all have what works for us. Really make sure that, again, it can be hard. I know I get caught up in it sometimes of comparing where you're at versus where your friends are at, or that maybe you were older than someone else when something happened, or you think you should already be there.
It's
We all
also
have-
good to think that we all compare ourselves.
Yes.
So like as you can see right now, like Lexi and I are both like, yeah, we're comparing ourselves to our friends. You know, so everyone is doing the same thing. You're all in the same boat. As much as you think you're not, you really are.
Yeah. So really just make sure, like, try your hardest to not compare and know that what you're doing is right for you, because we all have our own story. We all have our own experiences, and our story and our experiences are kind of is what makes us who we are and makes our life. So as much as, like, for me, I have people that I went to high school with that are now married or have kids or buying a house, which those are things that I'm not at right now. So there are times that I'm like, wow, I should be there, but it's totally okay that that's not the case. So if your friends are graduating and you're still in school, that's totally okay. Like, that's your path. That's what is your story. And it can be tough to shake those at times, but just remember that you're doing what's best for you, and it's your story and your life, and you're the one living it. You need to be happy with it. And if you're finding joy and you're doing what you want to do, then you're doing the best you can.
Like I did that too. Adding on to that, I did that too. Like one reason I went back to high school, one reason I went back to university was because everybody from high school that I went to high school with graduated, right? And I just went back, right? It was really weird. Like there's nobody that ever, they're all graduated, they're all working full time, they've all started on, some of them are married and relationships, whole nine, right? But yeah, like that's just it. Everybody's in their own different stages of life. And there's also one thing that I always try to be conscious about, and it's very simple. It's a very simple thing to do. We did it in this slide, is we use the word hard. I don't like that word, and people use it very, very frequently. When you say, oh, a test is hard, life's hard, those aren't tangible things, right? Hard is a measure of density. Something like an exam can't be physically hard unless it's written on a stone tablet, but we don't do that anymore. So what I'm getting at is replace it with the word challenging, right? Okay, sure, this test is challenging. Life is challenging, but guess what? A challenge can be overcome, right?
We've been on this one for a little bit, so we should move on to the next one. Thank you, everyone, for that. All right. How can you make yourself productive when you are being lazy? Provide some tips and advice, Jamie.
So when I read this, I mean, I kind of laughed because lazy is an interesting word. I think my biggest thing is when you feel like you're not being productive, or you have things that you could be getting done, or things that you want to do. My biggest thing for myself, or my biggest motivator, is to remember what my goals are. So I don't know if many of you have experience, you know, making goals, or even just maybe it's not like a goal, but it's like a thought you had, like, oh, if I get this done, then I'm gonna treat myself to something. I don't know, just an example. But I think, yeah, just remembering like what you want to do, what's your end goal with it, and remind yourself of where you're wanting to get, you know, and that kind of use that as a motivator to be like, okay, like I can get up, I can do this, I can fold my laundry. Oh God, I loathe laundry. And that's one of the, like, it's a little thing, but it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I could be the queen of laziness and just leave it forever until I'm like completely out of clothes. But I think, yeah, it's hard. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak on it. I'm losing my train of thought. So
I'll
I
add a
can,
quick, oh, sorry, Lexi, do you want to go? I'll kind
sure,
of.
I can go. So just to jump onto that a little bit, I think, or I'll give two sides of the spectrum. One being, if you're someone that kind of does well with structure, writing down like a to-do list or putting it in your phone or a calendar, so that you have everything that you want to get achieved today. So then you can look and be like, oh wow, I'm checking this one off and this one off and this one, and kind of work as a motivator for yourself. But then on the other side of it too, I think it's also really important to remember that our society has kind of trained us that if we're not constantly doing something or being productive, we're seen as lazy, but that's not the case. Like, you are allowed to relax. You are allowed to sit down. If that means scrolling through your phone or hanging out with friends or something, that's okay. Like, that's all part of life. And that's all things that we need. We're not robots that are supposed to just like go at all times. I know it feels like that at times, especially when we have lots of deadlines and commitments and whatnot. But it is okay to take time for yourself and to not, and if you want to have a day on laying on the couch in pajamas watching Netflix all day, like, that's okay. But then again, just kind of bringing that back to your goals, that if you're doing that every day, is it going to get you where you want to be? So kind of finding that happy medium and balance.
So I want to add one quick thing onto that too. For those of this is applicable to everybody, but for those of you that are going to university, you will find yourself in a flurry, especially your first semester. You'll find yourself in a flurry, guaranteed, trying to figure things out. And you might, and you will, unless you go back to that slide where we talked about self-care, unless you schedule in self-care time, you will start to burn out. And so that's one thing that can be seen as being lazy, is you might be burnt out. So an important thing to notice when you, let's say you're not driven to do your work, is to be self-aware and say, oh, I might be burnt out. Now it's time to do something fun, something that you will enjoy, something that's not school related, something that isn't going to drive you crazy, university, work, what have you, right? So yeah, just in general. So self-awareness and scheduling in time for self-care, that'll burn out. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, we're going to move on to the next one.
Yeah, agreed.
What are some good things to know about using a credit card, or using and having a credit card? Jamie.
okay, so credit cards are a very interesting thing. Basically, what a credit card does is it allows you to kind of spend money that you don't necessarily have. So a bank will give you a credit card and say you have a $1,500 limit. That means you can spend $1,500, which sounds great. You're like, woohoo, $1,500, that's sick. But the huge thing to know is that you owe them that money. So if you spend that $1,500, at the end of the month, you have to pay the bank back that $1,500. So a credit card is great if you want to track like your spending. So for myself, I use my credit card for my gas and for my necessary kind of bills. And so I always know I'm going to have the money for that stuff. And I get cash back on that, which I'm not going to go into a bunch of stuff about credit cards. I'll just give you some of my big tips. One would be, don't have a credit card limit higher than your paychecks, especially when you're starting out. So, I mean, you won't be able to get a credit card until you're 18 years old. But like my credit card limit started at $500 because at the time I was working as a cashier and I made like maybe $1,000 a month on my paychecks. And so that $500 was something I knew that I would have to pay the bank back. But you also have to be careful when you're spending that the money on a credit card. Another thing too, my second and biggest piece of advice, especially when you're starting out with a credit card, is if you do not have the money in your main bank account, in order to pay it back on that credit card right away, don't spend it, right? So if you have, say you just got paid and you'd spent all your money shopping and you have $25 in your bank account and you really want these shoes for $100. Well, you're like, well, I could use my credit card and I could cover that $75 I don't have. But I wouldn't recommend doing it, right? Because then you have $0 in your bank account and you owe the bank $75 that you do not have. So that would be my number one piece of advice when you get a credit card, is do not spend money that you cannot pay them back right away with. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add on. I don't think we want to go too in depth on credit cards for you guys because it's a ways out. But those are really huge key points.
Ignore the minimum payment is the only other thing that I want to say on that. Ignore the minimum payment. If your statement balance is $200, pay the $200.
Yeah,
because
I think that's a
otherwise-
little that's might be a bit much because
Yeah.
payments
Okay.
and stuff.
That's just one other quick thing. Yeah.
One
Yeah.
quick comment I want to say is some of the, again, we're not professionals, but when we send out like the written document, we can send out a couple examples of some of the cards that you can get, or like a cashback that works for us or something. But again, that's for a later date. One quick thing is it's a lot easier to credit gets ruined very easily. It is very hard to earn that good credit. So when you decide to get a credit card, make sure you're managing it and like on top of it. But we'll move on to the next slide.
Don't spend money you don't have.
All right,
Don't spend
affordable
money you
school
don't
and navigating student loans, scholarship applications. Jake.
Yeah, so affordable school, what I'd say about this is it's probably a good thing to consider, like when you're deciding what university you want to go to. It's expensive to live on campus. Housing is really expensive. So like something to consider is if you're nearby, like a local college or university that you could commute to from home and still live at home. That's what I did for my first years when I went to KPU. And that saved me quite a lot of money because I didn't have to pay for rent and, you know, all my own food and that kind of thing. So if you can do that and then transfer, you know, somewhere else later, that is an option and it might save you a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, navigating student loans. I've never done student loans myself. I have gotten a few scholarships. But yeah, I mean, essentially scholarship applications, you can use your volunteer work on there usually a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, essentially it just all comes down to getting the time to do the applications and submit them. And I just had a question about the previous question when you were talking about your reputation with your credit card. Would that be a credit score?
Yes.
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I believe your credit score is like if you're known to the bank for paying off your credit card right away and like never being like in debt and that kind of thing, then you'd have a good credit score, and there's benefits to that essentially. But yeah, I mean, affordable school, I guess my main tips would be if you can afford to if you can make it work to not have a car and not have to rent your own room by yourself, that will save you tons of money. I still don't have a car, and it is saving me lots of money because insurance, the price of the car itself, gas, repairs come up sometimes, and whatever else, it gets pretty expensive. So yeah, if you can cut down your expenses, then that will make your overall experience a lot more affordable, and then you'll have more money to do, you know, the things you want to do. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Awesome. Navpreet, quick question.
Yeah, while you were talking about it, I had another question about it, but it's kind of the opposite thing. Almost when you have like extra money in a way left, or if you don't have things that you need to pay, but you have a job at the moment, where do you think is like a good idea to invest money when you're a student?
We'll put some of those recommendations in the written, just because if we go into them all right now, it'll be a long rabbit hole. But big advice would be talk to your bank, see what options that they have, and see what investment options they have, or look at a savings debit card or savings account that you can start building up your money with.
Yeah, and as Jamie mentioned, open a TFSA. That's a tax-free savings account, and that is a great place to invest. I believe you need to be 18 years old to open a TFSA, and you can invest up to $6,000 a year in those. But that's a great option.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and then we will provide a little bit more in the written document that we send out after these sessions as well. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. How do you enroll in courses and programs, Ryan?
So you will get an email through whatever SF or whatever university email that is given to you. It will, for instance, with my university, it will direct me to, it'll direct me to my schedule, which is the SFU program. And then you basically just select the courses that are required, and it will automatically input within the schedule. And then just make sure there's no conflicts. Like, I'll always allow yourself 90 minutes, because otherwise you could be caught and you won't be able to get from one class to another in time, and you'll be continuously late. And then the professor will always know you. You will always be known to that professor as the kid that's always late, and that will not end well, or it just won't help with your education. I'm not quite sure how much more I can say on that. It's
one thing to note on that, that's kind of once you're already enrolled in the school.
Yeah.
If you're starting out for the first time enrolling in programs, first decide which programs or schools or programs that you want to apply for. Look into the program.
Even further.
You want to look into the program that you're doing, and once you've decided, okay, this is the one I want to apply for, your specific program, then depending on the school, some of your programs will have like a detailed, these are the courses you need to take to do this program. For me, for example, I went to BCIT, so it's a predetermined, like, I want this program, so it assigns all my courses to me. I don't get to pick. Where other schools like UBC, SFU, you individually pick your courses. So you need to know that if you're taking a science program, then you need to know which courses you want to take. So look at those requirements first. And then on the website, that'll say enroll now or book, or create an account so that you can go through that. Every website is a little bit different, but there will be prompts on every school's website program courses on kind of what to do next. And if you can't find that information, or if it's confusing, you don't understand, call the school's program advisor, because that's what they're there for. They will answer all your questions, help you determine any courses that you need to take for your program. If there are specific requirements that you need before them, they can help you with all of that. And it's better to ask the questions from somebody that knows, rather than not know and potentially not get into the program or course you want. But most of that information should be on their website as well. Anyone want to add anything last bit to that?
I think that was pretty good. Thanks for stepping in there, Alexia. Yeah.
No worries. How to transfer into programs from other schools, Jake?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I transferred from KPU into UBC. So the big things for transferring programs into other schools is this website called BC Transfer Guide, where essentially you make sure that the courses you take at one place will be transferable to get you credits at the second place that you want to go to. So if you're planning on transferring, it's really important that you consistently are checking this website to make sure that your courses will transfer over and get you credits to where you want to go. Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that I did transfer. I saved myself quite a lot of money. That's probably essentially the main thing. You can save yourself quite a lot
or say you go to a school and maybe you don't like it as much as you thought you did and want to transfer somewhere else, then that's an option as well. Yeah, I don't know, not too much else on this.
Just a quick time check. We are at 8:25, so we'll finish off kind of this last question, and then just for interest of time, we'll open up the floor. So if there's any questions from here or anything that didn't get answered, if you need to head off or anything, by all means, jump off. But then that way, last little bit will just be kind of open Q&A. What is university like, and how does it compare to high school? So the biggest thing I would say is you go from in high school kind of being walked through what you're doing, and for lack of better words, kind of being handheld a little bit, because the teachers usually are a little more on top of you and are trying to help you make sure you get everything done and achieved. And then you go to university, and not that they don't want you to succeed or help you or anything, but now you're going in and they're looking at you like an adult, that you are then forced to figure it out, and you're just expected to kind of do it. So I would say biggest piece of advice is go in with an open mind, and don't freak out when it's not exactly like high school, because it's not going to be. It's going to be very different. It might be a little bit scary, it might be a little bit challenging, but it would be well worth it. And just kind of prepare yourself for that. You need to be on top of things, and that you're not going to have a high school teacher kind of hounding you to get your homework in every day. That if you are told this is your deadline, a university teacher might remind you, but there's a very good chance that they're not going to, and you're just expected to make your deadlines. So really just make sure you're managing your time. You know what your deadlines are, you know what your assignments are, when your exams are, and that you're taking these steps and actions you need to take to prepare yourself and make sure that you're being successful.
Yeah, just keep in mind that in high school teachers has a class size of about 30, where in university it can vary, but like in a lot of my classes, it's 250. So they don't necessarily have that time to guide every single student through their class, but feel free to always ask them a question. A lot of them are very goofy. A lot of them are got a good sense of humor. They will be open to questions, because that is why they're there. They're there to teach. They're there to help people learn, right? So don't be afraid to ask them questions. But yes, it is a little different because they are dealing with a lot more students. Right?
One more thing as well, a lot of the instructors do have kind of the terms for them are a little bit different, but like office hours, basically what they're called, where it's usually like an open door that if you have questions or need help, you can go and ask questions, or if you need like that one-on-one support. And if it's a course that you're just not following on, if it's a math or science or something, most of the schools have tutoring options. And if you're struggling and you need that extra assistance because you're in a course with 250 people, absolutely reach out to those tutoring resources, see what's in your school or see what's around you so that you can get the help you need.
I kind of want to say one more thing too. And this is one thing that I had to learn a bit the hard way, is just keep in mind expectations. Like in high school, you'll be used to getting an A or a B. It's not, and that's your grade in high school. That's your grade. It's not set in stone in university, because likely there's going to be scaling. So let's say like you get a 60% on the exam, but everybody else gets a 60, right? Or actually, let's say everybody else gets a 50. You don't get a 60% in that class on a test, because likely that could end up being an A for all you know, right? So I don't get hung up on the grades quite that early, because you don't know what it will be at the end. Like I failed like 3 tests in one class and I've still ended up with a B+, right? So it's just relevant, and just keep that in mind. I just thought I'd add that. It's not as set in stone as high school.
Awesome. All right. So that's going to be the last like official question we'll ask. But we'll do a quick Q&A or open forum. If there's anything specific that wasn't touched on or you want to know more about, or follow-up question from anything we talked about, go ahead, put in the chat, raise your hand, just unmute, ask the question whenever you want. If you do need to head out, it is 8:30, so by all means, feel free to jump off. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that we provided a little bit of insight and could help with anything like that. If there are still more questions that need to be answered or you want to know about, we can always look at doing a part 3 as well. But hopefully that you found it beneficial, and we will be sending out the written document for some of the more kind of like technical pieces or places that we recommend going to, some links, so on. But if there's any other questions, feel free to ask them now. And if not, have a great night.